Welcome back, one and all, and thank you for joining me today. As always, I am Daniel Blake, and recently I was requested by the Dark Forest 0912 to do a rewrite of the sequel to Jeff the Killer, Homicidal Lou. Now, this is a very, very big moment for this channel because this is the very first video that I have been able to make due to one of your suggestions. So, big thank you to the Dark Forest for suggesting this awesome topic. And if any of you have requests that you'd like to see me make videos on, please drop them in the comments below. I'm pretty flexible and open to making videos about basically anything, so hit me up if you're interested. Now, before we get into it here, there's a couple quick things I wanted to let you all know about. First off, if you have not read the original Homicidal Lou, I highly encourage you to check out a video I made last week with my wife where we read the entire thing cover to cover. It's not very long and it's pretty funny if I do say so myself. The second point that I want to make here is this is actually a direct sequel to the Jeff the Killer rewrite I did a few months back. So once again, highly encourage you to listen to that before you jump on into the story of this video because it's just going to make a lot more sense chronologically of where we're at. So with that said, let's get on into it here, and I hope you enjoy my rewrite of Homicidal Lou. The light of the rising morning sun greedily encompassed the world, its warm beams of life being almost insulting to the boy as the door to the police car closed behind him. After taking his place in the driver's seat, the officer's foot gently pushed against the accelerator. As they began to roll forward, the detainee turned his attention out the window, giving a solemn wave to his tear-ridden mother and stone-faced brother, continuing the gesture until they disappeared from sight. The police siren would have been preferable to the silence that was left in its wake, and trying to comprehend how the situation escalated to such an extreme measure caused the young man's heart to throb in his head like a bass drum. Desperate to distract himself, he ran his fingers across the upholstery of the back seats, noting the stains of various bodily fluids that were left from countless others that were chauffeured in the vehicle. Occasionally, he would catch the slight waft of vomit and alcohol, forcing his face to tighten in disgust. After the second time the unpleasant fragrance infiltrated the boy's nostrils, the officer glanced in his rearview mirror and spoke. "Sorry about the stench, kid. I had just finished delivering some bum to the drunk tank right before I got the call to you all and didn't have much time to clean up the mess you left in my back seats." The young man locked eyes with the officer for a brief moment before turning downward. "It's okay." The silence resumed for the remainder of the 30-minute trip, with neither the policeman or his juvenile prisoner having a desire for conversation. As the tires came to rest in a space labeled police parking only, the officer opened the rear door, holding a pair of handcuffs. "Protocol says I have to cuff you before we can enter the station." The boy obediently held both his wrists forward, the cold metal shackling around him. Together, they entered the detention center for processing, and after what seemed like an eternity of documentation, the new arrival was placed in a small room. As he scanned the area, a toilet, sink, and bed were the only amenities provided in the cell. The beige walls were uninterrupted except for the large metal door and a tiny rectangular window, which was the sole source of natural light. As the young man sat on the edge of his lumpy mattress, a part of him wanted to crawl under the covers and force his eyes shut, hoping that today's events were just some nightmare he could wake up from. Even if he could convince himself to try, his anxiety-filled heart wouldn't allow it, being overloaded with fear of the future, he decided. His only solace was knowing that Jeff was safe, and maybe he could live enough life for the both of them. As the late afternoon approached, the door to the boy's cell opened, and a corrections officer clad in a gray uniform ushered him into a line of other detainees. Together, they walked single file to an area of the facility brandishing a large television and microphone. He watched as the other young men in front of him would speak to the screen before being taken back to a cell. Any attempts he made to communicate were met with commands to stay silent until it was his turn. 15 minutes later, the boy finally approached to see a magistrate on the TV who addressed respectfully. "Good day, Lou. That is how you pronounce your name, right?" Lou nodded, and the judge continued methodically. "I have spoken with your mother, Susan, and she is giving a not guilty plea. We will be scheduling your court date a month from today. With that said, due to the severity of the offense, we will be keeping you in our facility until then. Do you understand?" A lump swelled in Lou's throat as he uttered out a reply. "Yes, sir." It was only now that the gravity of the situation finally began to set in, the realization that these colorless walls could be his home for the remainder of his childhood. A twinge of regret ceaselessly poked and prodded Lou's psyche, a persistent hindsight of how the last 24 hours could have been avoided if he had just given Randy the $2.50 and walked away. The thought sickened him, now knowing that not only could he stay incarcerated for many years, but also that he was placing immense and avoidable stress on his family. Susan took advantage of every opportunity she could to see her son, masking her exhaustion and dread with a smile. While this should have brought comfort to the young man, he couldn't help but feel unbridled guilt, which only grew with each visitation. A week and a half had passed in the detention center, of which Lou spent the majority of his time living in his mind. He would craft pretend stories of heroes and fantastic beasts, just like when Jeff and him were small kids play fighting with sticks in the backyard. A remembrance of an easier time always helped the day go by faster and quell his creeping loneliness. It was during one of these inner monologues that a loud buzzing noise snapped him back into reality. A corrections officer approached the boy, motioning for him to approach. Without a word, the CO brought Lou through a set of doors to the visitation area where his mother stood, a genuine smile on her face. "Hey honey, ready to come home?" Confused, the young man furrowed his brow. What do you mean?" Susan rushed over and embraced her son. "They found a video of the incident and the judge demands you be released immediately. You're innocent, Lou!" For the first time since the accident, perspiration welled in the boy's eyes, pressing his face into his mother's blouse. Home and family were something Lou had always taken for granted, but in that moment, he vowed to never make that mistake again. As they exited the facility and entered Susan's minivan, a sudden emptiness washed over Lou. "Hey, where's Jeff?" Susan's jovial expression sagged into a partial frown as she turned the key in the ignition. "Jeff had a bit of an accident." Sensing the concern grasping at Lou, she quickly resumed a positive facade. But don't worry, he's okay and will be back home tonight, as will your father." Her words were enough for the young man to nod in acceptance and sculpt a shaky smile across his lips. The remainder of the trip home was filled with Susan's questions of her son's experience in the detention center, which were met with short, unsatisfying replies. As the car pulled into the driveway, Susan smiled at her son. "Home sweet home!" The sight of the house did little to shake Lou's concern for his brother. However, the smell of a roasting turkey was a pleasant distraction that caused the young man's stomach to rumble in anticipation. Seeing the grimace of hunger on Lou's face, his mother grabbed a granola bar from her purse. Here, dinner will be ready in about an hour. I promise, it will be worth the wait." The boy nodded, taking a bite from the snack, and instinctively climbed the stairs to his bedroom. As he passed by the door obnoxiously branded with a sign labeled "Jeff's Room, Keep Out," a pang of bittersweet nostalgia struck him like a hammer. This was the first time the brothers had been separated for more than a week, and being without Jeff had taken its toll. The normally social boy had crawled into an emotional shell, and only his best friend could convince him to come out. Lou sat on the floor, content to lose himself in a memory, and before long, his mother was summoning him to the dining room. The Thanksgiving-level feast, lovingly made as a reunion of the family, ended up lacking two key members. An awkward silence hung over the table, and after a painful 20 minutes of waiting for Jeff and her husband, Susan begrudgingly gave in and allowed the meal to be consumed. Lou pushed a pea around his plate as his mother excused herself for a moment. He could hear Susan leaving a less than amused voicemail for his father before returning, doing her best to shake off the frustration. "Why don't we watch a movie after I put away the leftovers? Or we could play a game if you'd rather do that." Lou stood up from the table, wishing he could have enjoyed his first home-cooked meal in over a week more. "I'm pretty tired. I just want to go to bed." Susan curled her lips in, understanding but disappointed in her son's reply. Okay, sweetie. You go get a good night's rest and we can have a family fun day tomorrow. I love you." She kissed her son on the forehead as he walked by. The springs creaked as Lou flopped onto his bed, hoping that if he just closed his eyes, he'd see his brother again when they opened. As the inevitability of sleep finally overtook the young man, his wish became an unfortunate reality. Nature's calls stirred Lou from his rest, prompting the boy to stumble zombified to the restroom. He tried to keep his senses as dulled as possible, not wanting to be broken from his near comatose state. However, as the deafening rain pelted the rooftop, a shadow-laden visage appeared for just a moment in a flash of lightning. Lou blinked rapidly, rubbing his eyes with his fists. In the doorframe to his parents' bedroom stood the outline of a soaking wet kid, similarly sized to himself. Lou's lips trembled, barely squeaking out his words. Jeff? Is that you? Among the rain, a quiet voice calmly spoke above the noise, uttering a phrase that would stick with the young man for the rest of his life. Just go to sleep. As another flash of lightning illuminated the hall, the figure disappeared. Unsure if he was dreaming, Lou slowly walked to where it was standing, his feet pushing moisture from the carpet as he approached. The closer he got to the bedroom, the more drenched the floor became, until the threadwork was an unrecognizable texture. The boy flipped the light switch, the bulb's glow chasing the darkness from the room and directly into his heart. The crimson ichor Lou was standing in was a mere puddle in comparison to the ocean of gore in front of him. The once pristine white linens were thrown messily across the bed, being stained red from the pile of viscera in its center. The bodies of his parents hung over each other, their fingertips mere inches from the ground. Blood poured from countless holes jaggedly punctured in the corpses, filling the room with an immense smell of iron and the stickiness of a movie theater floor. The vile tool used in the crime, a serrated knife used to carve the turkey from dinner, was lodged deep into Susan's forehead. Abhorration and disbelief froze Lou in place. His mind raced, assembling the grotesque puzzle piece by piece. By the time the terrible picture was complete, the doorbell rang and was immediately followed by an authoritative voice. Police! Anyone home? The bell rang again, followed by a knock that echoed throughout the house. Police! Please open the door! Lou stayed silent. The command was nothing more than static to the boy now. Another attempt was made by the officer. Police! We need to speak with you about your son, about Jeffrey. He's missing from the hospital. Jeff's name was the trigger word that brought Lou to action. The young man mechanically descended the stairs before unlocking and pulling open the front door. An officer shined his flashlight into the boy's face before flinching backwards and placing his hand on his holster reflexively. The policeman reached for his chest, his thumb pressing a button on his radio. Unit 312, requesting immediate backup and EMS. After quickly scanning the young man, the officer crouched to meet Lou's downward-facing eyes. Son, is there anyone else here? Are you hurt? The boy remained silent. The policeman waited outside with him, keeping his light on the door until the additional services arrived. As the police swept the house, an EMT guided Lou to the ambulance, where he was checked for injury. More squad cars arrived, the number seemingly increasing by the minute. Lou didn't know how long he sat in the back of that ambulance before the initial policeman spoke with him again, his voice staggering. Lou, did you do anything to hurt your parents? The evening rushed unobstructed through the boy's mind, the reality of its events finally sinking in. Lou, did you harm your parents? The look of terror on his parents' cadavers was an image that would never wipe clean, but even worse was the gut-churning idea that his brother was responsible for the act. Lou, did you attack your parents with a knife? He just wanted to go back in time, before the murders, before his arrest, before his innocence was lost. Lou, did you kill your parents? He was alone. No friends, no parents, no brother. Just a choice to be made. He could try and somehow convince the officer that a missing Jeff was responsible, or to take the blame and protect him one more time. Lou, answer me. The young man's eyes met the policeman as he swallowed hard, shaking his head in acknowledgement. As cuffs were once again placed around his wrists and he was loaded into a squad car, a single, devastating thought relentlessly assaulted Lou. I should have listened. I should have gone to sleep. And with that, we have reached the end of the video, so thank you so much if you've stuck with me this far. I hope you enjoyed that reading, and I would love to hear any other thoughts of yours down in the comments. If you wouldn't mind leaving a like and subscribing if you haven't yet, that would just be absolutely fabulous. And if you're feeling extra generous, I do have a Patreon in my bio, but no pressure on that whatsoever. I'm grateful for whatever love you guys want to give. So thank you so much one more time. I hope you have just the most wonderful day, and we will talk more soon. Deuces!